All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Bashem and Hawashai, Bahashem Raha Kwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in his truth in all sincerity. Jeremiah 50:9, NLT. For I am raising up an army of great nations from the north. They will join forces to attack Babylon, and she will be captured. The enemy's arrows will go straight to the mark. They will not miss. This is an article from Tag 24, published January 5th, 2026, earlier today at 11:28 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. North Korea launches hypersonic missiles as Kim Jong-un says nuclear forces are ready for war. And I'm just going to skim through the article. I'm just going to try to hit some of the key points. I'm not going to read the entire thing. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the firing of cutting-edge hypersonic missiles as he ramped up the preparation of nuclear forces for war, state media reported Monday. Seoul and Tokyo said Sunday they had detected the launch from near Pyongyang of 2 ballistic missiles. On Monday, the Korean Central News Agency, KCNA, quoted Kim as saying the test showed the readiness of the DPRK's nuclear forces. DPRK is Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Important achievements have been recently made in putting our nuclear forces on a practical basis and preparing them for an actual war, Kim insisted per KCNA. Why it is necessary is exemplified by the recent geopolitical crisis and complicated international events, Kim reportedly said in a clear reference to the violent overthrow of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro by the U.S. North Korea on Sunday condemned the attack as a serious encroachment of sovereignty that clearly confirms once again the rogue and brutal nature of the U.S. The weapon system highlighted on Monday was the first tested in October. And the last thing I'll read here is hypersonic missiles travel at more than 5 times the speed of sound and can maneuver mid-flight, making them harder to track and intercept. So we're seeing that what happened in Venezuela the past couple of days, well, a couple of days ago, I should say, and along with a lot of other past aggressions by Babylon against much weaker nations, is the reason why countries such as North Korea and Iran, why they're racing to upgrade or enhance their nuclear potential. No nation wants to feel like a sitting duck. No nation or world leader, for that matter, wants to feel like a sitting duck to Babylon or any other nation with a stronger military. And so the way to prohibit that is becoming a sitting duck, I should say, is to develop a nuclear weapon. And after that, to develop as many more as possible. So we go back to this article here where they stated that this was done as a nuclear war deterrent. And I'm pretty sure I just read that here. Yeah, Pyongyang's ramped up military activity, he said, was aimed at gradually putting the nuclear war deterrent on a high developed basis. And see, these nations, they may call their nuclear program a deterrent, but we're pretty much past the days of using nukes as deterrents. These nations are about to go on a full offensive with these things. So these are not really deterrents anymore. A deterrent is basically, I have a nuke, you have a nuke, so it's best we don't mess with each other. But those countries are not, they're not negotiating like this anymore. These countries are pretty much getting ready for all-out nuclear war here. So when we come back down to why it's necessary, it's exemplified by the recent geopolitical crises and complicated international events, Kim reportedly said in a clear reference to the violent overthrow of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro by the U.S. Yeah, and, these other countries don't want to take any chances. The United States feels like they can just go in there and send in Delta Force whenever they feel like it and pretty much snatch up anybody the way they did Maduro and his wife. So let's take a look at Jeremiah 50 and 14. Yes, prepare to attack Babylon, all you surrounding nations. Let your archers shoot at her. Spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh. And, once again, those particular nations would be China, Russia, North Korea, and potentially Iran. These countries are not going to fight the U.S. with conventional weapons. They're not going to waste the resources, manpower, the time or the money doing that. These nations are going to use their unconventional weaponry, which are nuclear weapons. And Russia is pretty much seeing what happens when, fighting Ukraine. And I think I mentioned this a couple of days ago in a video. With Russia fighting Ukraine, don't think for 1 second Russia is, not feeling like they look a certain type of way in the world right now as far as their strength. Because, Russia should not have taken almost 4 years now, and this war is still going on. And the only reason why this war is still going on is because the U.S. is supplying Ukraine with conventional weaponry. So the U.S.'s conventional weaponry, even though Russia is actually winning and advancing in that war, it's taking a long time. It's taking millions of dollars, multi-millions of dollars at that. A significant amount of resources are being used in a war against Ukraine, a much weaker nation. But the only reason why it's taking this long is because the U.S. is supplying Ukraine with conventional weaponry. And as you can see, the U.S.'s conventional weaponry is enough to drag this war out for as long as possible in an attempt to keep trying to weaken the Russian military. So they may not necessarily be trying to win the U.S. as far as Ukraine, but they're trying to weaken Russia's military as much as possible by supplying them with conventional missiles and, surface-to-air missiles and that type of stuff in order to, just drain Russia or try to deplete Russia of as many military resources as possible. So these countries right now, they're not going to waste the time trying to fight the U.S. with conventional means. They've developed these nuclear weapons, these unconventional weapons, which are nukes and, other things such as, things that we may have heard of in the past, certain chemical warfare that would be considered unconventional warfare or weaponry. They've developed these unconventional weapons for a reason, which is their nukes. And that's for the sole purpose of using them. These particular countries here are not going to sit here and allow the U.S. to just, come in there with Delta Force and just start snatching up their politicians. At the end of the day, these countries are going to use what is available to them, and that is their nuclear arsenal, which is going to eventually rain down on Babylon, as you can see here. Let your archers shoot at her. Spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh. So I'll also go into verse 15. Shout war cries against her from every side. Look, she surrenders. Her walls have fallen. It is Yahweh's vengeance. So take vengeance on her. Do to her as she has done to others. And we know that the U.S. has used their nukes. In fact, the only country to have used nukes on another country. 2 of them, as a matter of fact, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the Most High here is instructing these nations to do to her as she has done to others. And ultimately, that is how the U.S. is going to fall, by thermonuclear fire. So with that being said, let's go into, I want to play a video real fast here. Just something that I came across. This video is actually maybe 2 years old now, if I'm correct. And, this is when Trump, he was, well, I should say Nero, he's talking a lot of, he thinks it's a game here. But like I said, this particular video was published here or uploaded here on October 26, 2024. So a little less than a year and a half ago. We'll hit play.
By the time I finished, we had no problem with North Korea. We were really, it was a little tough at the beginning, remember? Mm-hmm. He said, I have a red button on my desk. I said, I have a red button also. but mine's bigger than yours and mine works.
I liked how you called him Little Rocket Man.
I said, yeah, Little Rocket. I said, Little Rocket Man, you're going to burn in hell. And it was a rough,
Yeah.
oh, it was so rough that people were worried. This is crazy. And then one day I got a call, sort of like a fight. I got a call. You know, you ever see one that pounding, then all of a sudden, but I got a call. And it was from him, meaning his people. They wanted to meet. They wouldn't meet Obama. He tried to meet. They wouldn't even talk to him about it. And I think he expected to go to war. I actually do. I believe he expected to go. And we checked their nuclear stockpile. It is substantial. I mean, I said, do you do anything? I got to know him very well. I got to know him better than anybody. And I said, do you ever do anything else? Why don't you go take it easy and relax? Go to the beach. You have beautiful beach, nice beachfront property. You know, kiddingly. I said,
Right.
You're always building nuclear. Just relax. You don't have to do it. Let's build some condos on your shoreline. They actually have gorgeous stuff. And he said, I just have to do it because I need it for my safety, etc. I got to know him very well. We had no problem with him.
So you can see even Trump is admitting, even though he's saying it in a jokingly fashion that, Kim Jong-un needs to relax, he needs to chill and things to that effect, he is admitting that North Korea's nuclear arsenal is substantial. It's probably more than what he expected to see, or possibly even more than what he was briefed on. He probably had to see it for himself to actually believe it. So let's take a look at Jeremiah 51:1. And I'll read this in the NLT. This is what Yahweh says. I will stir up a destroyer against Babylon and the people of Babylonia. Foreigners will come in and winnow her, blowing her away as chaff. They will come from every side to rise against her in her day of trouble. And that's it, that's this destroyer here. In the KJV, it says, Thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will raise up against Babylon and against them that dwell in the midst of them that rise up against me a destroying wind. And that wind is what's known as nuclear winter. When a nuclear bomb goes off, you have this sweltering, melting heat, that's just vaporizing everything in its midst. And that's basically what these countries are preparing to do to Babylon, and I was a little skeptical myself. I wasn't, I had to do a little quick online search here, and I had to ask Google AI overview, can North Korea nukes reach the U.S.? I knew their nukes were potent enough to reach, Japan, which is approximately 600 to 700 miles away. Obviously, South Korea, if they wanted to nuke that, they could, but yes, North Korea has developed into ICBMs with ranges capable of reaching the U.S.'s mainland, demonstrating this through numerous tests, including recent launches of solid-fueled missiles like Hwasong-18 and development of hypersonic weapons, making a nuclear strike on North America a credible, though still challenging threat that the U.S. actively works to defend against. So, North Korea is actually capable of reaching the U.S. I was well aware that they could reach any of the U.S.'s allies in the South Pacific, but not very well aware that they are capable now of reaching the U.S. So they have truly advanced their nuclear arsenal, as Nero himself has admitted. They have a very significant nuclear arsenal. Let's take a look at Jeremiah 51:7. I'll just scroll down a little bit here. Babylon has been a gold cup in Yahweh's hands, a cup that made the whole earth drink. A cup that made the whole earth drunk, Salakia. The nations drank Babylon's wine, and it drove them all mad. And that's exactly what's happening here. These countries have all in some way, shape, or fashion all dealt with Babylon in the past, and they've probably pretty much always come up with the short end of the stick. And these countries are pretty much tired of dealing with Babylon. They feel like they've been slaves to the dollar through the United States' sanctions, and this is over. Various presidents have used these tactics, these methods to try to bully these particular countries, but they are no longer having it, and they're basically ready for war. And that is exactly what they're preparing for. So let's take a look at Isaiah 10 and 7 real fast, because this particular chapter, sounds just like Trump to me speaking, but this is what the sovereign Yahweh says. I'm sorry, 10 and 7, not 7 and 10. Isaiah 10, verse 7. But the king of Assyria will not understand that. He is my tool. His mind does not work that way. His plan is simply to destroy, to cut down nation after nation. And that's what you hearing Nero talk about now. He did what he did in Venezuela. Now he's threatening Colombia and Cuba with the same action, as well as Nigeria. And that's precisely what it says here. Let's scroll up to verse 6. I am sending Assyria against a godless nation, against a people with whom I am angry. Assyria will plunder them, trampling them like dirt beneath its feet. But the king of Assyria will not understand that he is my tool. His mind does not work that way. His plan is simply to destroy, to cut down nation after nation. And that is exactly what Nero is threatening right now, as far as, Colombia, Cuba, Nigeria. This is right after what he's done in Venezuela. And just like here, verse 9, we destroy Kauno just as we destroyed Karshmish. Hathmith fell before us as Arpid did. And we destroyed Samaria just as we did Damascus. So this particular scripture here through the Spirit, if you're reading this with discernment, this almost sounds just like Trump. This is why in verse 13, the Most High says, he boasts, by my own powerful arm I have done this. With my own shrewd wisdom I planned it. I have broken down the defenses of nations and carried off their treasures, just as the U.S. just went into Venezuela. And not only have they plundered their oil, but Venezuela has something like $513 trillion worth of gold. I forgot how many metric tons that was. So, they're probably going to take that gold as well. Venezuela also has like large aluminum and bauxite, mineral resources and stuff like that. So that's aluminum, so the U.S. is about to plunder this nation. And just like it says here, I have broken down their defenses. I have broken down the defenses of nations and carried off their treasures. I have knocked down their kings like a bow, just like Nicolas Maduro has just been snatched up. He's been knocked down, as the scripture says. So this almost lines up, and it sounds like Trump. If you read starting from verse 13, he boasts, and you do your best Trump impression right there on Isaiah chapter 10, verse 13. It sounds just like the way Trump talks. The way Nero talks. It sounds just like him. And then you scroll down to 14. I have robbed their nest of riches and gathered up kingdoms as farmers gather eggs. No one can flap a wing against me or utter a peep of protest. And that's exactly how Nero is thinking right now. He's feeling like he's unstoppable. But there is always a great neutralizer. In this particular case, you have 4 great neutralizers. And those particular countries just happen to be Russia, China, North Korea, and potentially Iran, depending on how fast they can get their nuclear programming upgraded and enhanced. So with that being said, I'll close with Jeremiah 50 and 24. Let's close with Jeremiah 50 and 24, which says in the NLT, listen, Babylon, for I have set a trap for you. You were caught, for you have fought against Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. And that is Babylon right now. They are caught in a snare, and they are about to be plundered. They are about to be desolate amongst the nations, as verse 23 says right above. With that being said, I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.